The models just confirmed what I've been watching build for weeks, and what they are showing right now changes everything about this summer. A rapidly developing El Niño, described by forecasters as potentially a Super El Niño event, is already beginning to reshape the jet stream over North America. Multiple rounds of organised severe weather are lined up across the plains and Midwest through the next 10 days. A heat dome is building across the western and central United States with temperatures running 4 to 6 degrees above normal across large swathes of the country. And in the tropics, a moisture plume is surging through the Caribbean toward the Gulf of Mexico, and the models are watching it closely for development. Today I am going to walk you through the severe weather picture for the next 48 hours, who is most at risk and why. Then I will take you through the 7-day outlook day by day. After that, we are going to go deep into the big pattern shift that is reshaping this entire summer season. And at the end, I have been building towards something you need to hear about the long range, because the second half of June looks like nothing we have seen in years. This is June 4th, 2026. My name is Arthur. Welcome to Sky Space Lab. Let's get into the data. If you are new here, this channel exists to give you the science, not the hype. We follow the actual model runs, the ensemble data, the National Weather Service discussions, and the institutional research so that you understand what is actually happening in the atmosphere and what it means for your area. Hit the subscribe button so you do not miss a single update this summer, because based on what the models are showing right now, the next few weeks are going to require daily attention. Let's get into it. The Storm Prediction Center has severe weather outlined across a significant corridor of the United States today and tonight. The most dangerous setup right now is concentrated across the northern high plains, specifically across western North Dakota, eastern Montana, and into western South Dakota. This is where the atmosphere is most primed for discrete supercell thunderstorms this afternoon. Here is who needs to watch this the most. If you are in Bismarck, Rapid City, Miles City, Dickinson, or Minot, you're in the zone of greatest concern between 2 o'clock and 8 o'clock this evening. The setup is textbook. A Lee cyclone is deepening rapidly over the northern high plains, interacting with a shortwave trough dropping out of western Canada. Low-level moisture is surging northward from the Gulf of Mexico, with dew points in the mid-50s already established across the Dakotas. Wind shear values are impressive. Directional shear in the 0 to 1 kilometer layer is supportive of supercell tornadoes. The Storm Prediction Center has placed a level 2 out of 5 slight risk across this corridor, with an embedded enhanced probability for large hail. Large hail is the dominant threat in the early afternoon. The instability is deep. Cape values are building toward 2,000 joules per kilogram across central Montana and western North Dakota by mid-afternoon. Storms that develop in this environment will be capable of producing hail up to 2.5 inches in diameter. That is baseball size. Some isolated reports of 3-inch hail are not out of the question in the most intense supercells. The tornado threat is real and it needs to be taken seriously. The significant tornado parameter, the composite index that measures how favourable the atmosphere is for significant tornadoes, is showing values above 1 across parts of western North Dakota and northern South Dakota by late afternoon. Values above 1 indicate an elevated chance of EF2 or stronger tornado potential. This is not a guarantee of tornadoes, but it is a clear signal that the atmosphere has the ingredients loaded. As storms upscale into linear segments during the evening hours, and the low-level jet strengthens after sunset, the threat will transition from isolated tornadoes to a widespread damaging wind event. Wind gusts of 60 to 70 miles per hour are likely with the squall line as it moves eastward into the Dakotas overnight. There is also a secondary threat area worth your attention today. Across the Texas Panhandle and into eastern New Mexico, scattered severe thunderstorms are expected during the afternoon hours. The main concern here will be large hail and locally damaging wind gusts. Tornado risk in this southern area is lower given storm mode, but hail up to golf ball size is very much on the table from Amarillo northward through Pampa and Canadian. The southeast is also in the picture today. A frontal boundary draped from northern Florida northeastward through the Carolinas will be the focus for scattered showers and thunderstorms. The severe weather risk here is lower, marginal at best, but damaging wind gusts are possible in any stronger cells near Charleston, Columbia, and into the North Carolina Piedmont region this afternoon and evening. Make sure your weather alert app is active. Make sure you know your tornado action plan today. If you are in the northern plains especially, do not wait until warnings are issued to take shelter. Warnings can come with only minutes of lead time when supercells develop as fast as they will this afternoon. Tomorrow is Thursday, June 5th. The severe weather threat continues, and it does not let up. The same low-pressure system that drives today's event will track slowly eastward overnight, deepening as it goes. By Thursday morning, it will be positioned over the central Dakotas. A tight pressure gradient around that low will keep strong winds in place across the northern plains throughout the day. The severe weather focus on Thursday shifts slightly southward and eastward compared to today. Watch Rapid City, Sioux Falls, and Aberdeen closely Thursday afternoon. The Storm Prediction Center is highlighting this region for another round of supercell activity between noon and 7 p.m. The atmosphere reloads overnight, moisture surges back northward behind the cold front passage, and instability builds again by midday Thursday. Another 2,000 joules per kilogram or higher of CAPE is possible across central South Dakota. Large hail and damaging winds remain the primary hazards on Thursday, with at least a low tornado risk in the discrete phase before storms consolidate into a line. Moving into Friday, June 6th, this is where things get very interesting. A Pacific storm system is tracking eastward and will begin to influence the Central Plains by Friday afternoon. This is a significant piece of energy, not a minor shortwave. As it drops southeastward, it will interact with a very moist air mass that has been building across Oklahoma and Kansas all week. Dew points in the mid-60s are forecast across eastern Kansas and Missouri by Friday afternoon. This is the kind of moisture loading that feeds large, organized severe weather. The Storm Prediction Center's Day 4 through 8 outlook, issued as of this morning, specifically highlights Friday and Saturday for scattered severe storms capable of large to very large hail and damaging winds across portions of the upper Midwest and Central Plains. An isolated tornado threat is also possible Friday, especially if discrete supercells can persist ahead of the main convective line. Here is where the story takes a turn. The models have been progressively pushing the Friday severe weather threat further south and east with each new run. The Euro and the GFS are now both showing a large swathe of enhanced instability, covering Iowa, Missouri, Illinois, and Indiana by Friday evening. These are areas that have had very little severe weather over the past 30 days. The atmosphere is about to remind them why June is severe weather season. Saturday, June 7th, brings additional storm opportunities as that low-pressure system moves into the Great Lakes. Indiana, Ohio, and Michigan have seen an unusually quiet spring. The Storm Prediction Center noted that there were essentially 0 tornado warnings issued in Indiana during the month of May. That relative quiet is about to end. Saturday's threat will be more disorganized, scattered supercells rather than a well-defined squall line, but damaging hail and isolated tornado risk will be on the table. Sunday and into Monday, June 8th and 9th, the pattern temporarily backs off before reloading again. But here is the critical detail, and I will show you exactly why in just a moment. The big picture here is not just about this week. What we are witnessing right now is the opening act of what forecasters are describing as the most dynamically active summer pattern in years, and it is being driven by something larger than any individual storm system. The Nino 3.4 index is already approaching +1 as of today. That puts us near the threshold of moderate El Niño status in early June. For context, weak La Niña conditions were in place just a few months ago. The transition has been extraordinarily rapid. Latest oceanic analysis from NOAA confirms a powerful subsurface Kelvin wave has been surfacing in the eastern Pacific, accelerating the warming trend. Multiple seasonal forecast systems, including the European Centre for Medium-Range Weather Forecast seasonal model, are now showing this event reaching Super El Niño intensity by the second half of the year. This is developing faster and stronger than initially projected by any of the major modelling centres. You need to understand what this means for your summer. During strong El Niño phases, the subtropical jet stream, normally positioned near the US-Mexico border, intensifies dramatically and becomes more active. This strengthened subtropical jet acts as a continuous conveyor belt of energy and moisture along the southern tier of the country. At the same time, the Pacific Jet Extension, a technical term for the Pacific Jet pushing into the western United States, creates a downstream chain reaction that sets up repeated severe weather opportunities across the Central Plains and Midwest. One forecast provider, Hunter at Weather on the Go, described the current Typhoon Genmi scenario east of Japan as generating one of the strongest Pacific jet extensions he has seen in the month of June in his career. That is not hyperbole. When a Western Pacific typhoon recurves and feeds energy back into the Pacific jet, the downstream effects on the continental United States can be profound. We're already seeing the signatures of that extension in the current model runs. The troughs lining up across the Pacific Northwest and into the Northern Rockies, which you can see in the 500 millibar pattern right now, are a direct consequence of that Pacific jet extension. The NOAA June 2026 outlook, confirmed in the last week, shows above normal temperatures across the western United States, the Central Plains, the Mississippi Valley, the Ohio Valley, the Mid-Atlantic and the Southeast. A broader, warmer-than-normal summer is coming for most of the country. But the most significant signal in the June outlook is not heat alone. It is the overlap of hazards. Severe Weather, Europe's analysis, published in the last week, specifically highlights an increase in hail frequency anomaly across the west central and northern plains, the Intermountain West, the Southwest and Florida, under a Super El Niño pattern. These are the years when storm activity is not concentrated in one classic tornado alley corridor, it spreads. The atmosphere becomes opportunistic, finding pockets of instability and shear across a much larger geographic footprint. There is also the derecho concern. Multiple forecasters are raising the likelihood of derecho events. Those are fast-moving lines of storms producing widespread damaging winds across hundreds of miles. As the summer pattern establishes itself, Hunter's derecho season forecast for 2026 places the most likely corridor from South Dakota to central Kentucky, covering Iowa, Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, and eastern Nebraska. That corridor begins ramping up around mid-June and extends through the rest of summer. If you live anywhere in that zone, you need a severe weather plan, not just for tornadoes, but for the sudden violent winds that come with a nighttime derecho. These events kill people in their beds. They drop trees through roofs without warning, and the current pattern strongly favours their development. The heat side of the equation is no less significant. The western United States has already been running well above normal for much of spring, with the record-shattering March heat dome covering nearly the entire country, and the June pattern is extending that warmth into the central states. High-pressure ridging over the west will intensify through the weekend, pushing temperatures into the 90s across much of the southern and central plains. Into the southeast, temperatures are expected to run 10 to 15 degrees above normal through the middle of next week. The combination of extreme heat and high dew points into the upper 60s and low 70s, are forecast for parts of the Ohio Valley and southeast by June 8th, will produce heat index values approaching 110 degrees in some areas. Updated just 1 hour ago from the latest model runs, the ridging pattern that builds through the weekend is showing stronger and more persistent characteristics than the earlier runs suggested. The Omega block configuration, a high-pressure system locked in place over the west with deep troughs on either side, is one of the classic setups for extreme heat in summer. When this pattern locks in, it can persist for 2 to 3 weeks. The ensemble data is suggesting this particular ridge may hold through the third week of June. Here is what the second half of June looks like from the current vantage point. The Storm Prediction Center's Day 4 through 8 outlook, covering the period from Saturday through next Wednesday, specifically highlights the potential for severe weather outbreaks across the northern plains and Midwest. Multiple intense low-pressure systems are expected to develop. The second week of June in particular is being flagged by multiple forecast providers as a period of heightened outbreak potential. Grand Forks, Fargo, Sioux Falls, and Minneapolis are already being highlighted for 5 or more inches of rainfall potential between now and June 13th, some of that in the form of severe convective events. But here is where it gets really interesting, and I will show you exactly why in just a moment. Before we wrap up, there is one more thing you need to know, and this is the part I've been building toward. The tropics are entering the picture. Most channels are not showing you this part yet, but it matters. As of this morning, multiple model systems, both the European ensemble and the GFS ensemble, are picking up on a signal that needs to be watched closely for the 10 to 15-day period. Here is what we know. The Atlantic hurricane season officially began on June 1st. Right now, the main development region, the stretch of ocean from the Lesser Antilles to the coast of Africa, is running cooler than average. This is a direct signature of the developing El Niño, which is suppressing Atlantic tropical activity through increased wind shear across the deep tropics. The National Hurricane Center's current tropical weather outlook shows no activity expected in the Atlantic over the next 7 days. That part of the picture is quiet, and it is likely to remain quiet for a period. However, the Eastern Pacific and the Western Caribbean are a very different story. Typhoon Genmi, currently tracking east of Japan, is not just an Asia story. As it recurves toward the North Pacific, it is feeding energy into the Pacific jet extension I described earlier. That jet extension is in turn pumping moisture northward and eastward across Mexico and into the Gulf. Dr. Ryan Mao's tropical analysis, published as of June 1st, specifically noted that a moisture plume is surging through the Caribbean into the Gulf of Mexico and then northward through the eastern United States by mid-June. This is a significant transport of tropical moisture into the continental weather pattern. The Eastern Pacific is busy right now. Multiple disturbances are present or developing west of Central America. Amanda has already formed in the Pacific. Boris is expected to develop. The AccuWeather lead hurricane expert explicitly flagged the central and eastern Gulf and the southwestern Atlantic as areas to monitor for tropical development later this month. That is not a casual statement from a major forecast provider. Here is where the model signal comes in. The European ensemble at day 12 and beyond is showing a scenario where energy crosses Central America and enters the Gulf of Mexico. The GFS is showing a slightly faster and more aggressive version of the same general evolution. When both models are seeing a similar large-scale pattern, even if the specific details differ, it is a signal that the atmosphere is trying to set something up. The environmental factors in the Gulf are worth examining closely. Sea surface temperatures in the Gulf of Mexico are running above average right now. The warm anomaly extends from the western Gulf eastward across the Florida Straits and into the western Atlantic. This is fuel. Warm water in the Gulf is like a loaded gun waiting for a disturbance to pull the trigger. Wind shear is the primary inhibiting factor right now. The upper-level high-pressure system currently positioned over the Gulf and the Caribbean is producing elevated shear across the western Gulf. But here is the critical timing issue. Multiple model runs are showing that upper-level high migrating westward toward Mexico and the Pacific through the second week of June. As that high shifts west, shear in the northern and eastern Gulf decreases. The window of reduced shear coincides with the period when model guidance is showing the potential for a disturbance to move northward from the western Caribbean. The ensemble members, both Euro and GFS, are showing multiple solutions. Some take a system into the Bay of Campeche. Others track something northward into the Florida Peninsula or the northern Gulf Coast. The spread in the solutions is large, as you would expect at 12 to 15 days. This is not a forecast, this is a heads up. What I want you to take away from the tropics discussion is this. The second half of June is not simply a severe weather story in the plains. It is a story about the entire atmospheric pattern reorganizing under the influence of a rapidly strengthening El Niño. That reorganization is creating hazards simultaneously across multiple systems and multiple scales. Severe weather in the plains and Midwest, heat across the west and south, and a developing tropical moisture signature in the Gulf that needs to be watched every single day. There is one more dimension to this story that very few people are talking about. The Kelvin wave currently surfacing in the Eastern Pacific, the subsurface ocean feature that is driving the El Niño acceleration, is not a small event. Severe Weather Europe's analysis compared its rate of development to the Super El Niño events of the past. The two strongest Super El Niño events in the modern record, 1997 to 98 and 2015 to 2016, both produced remarkably active tropical seasons in the Eastern Pacific, with several systems crossing into Mexico or the Gulf. The Eastern Pacific in particular appears very warm and very favourable for tropical development right now. If Boris or any subsequent system organizes and tracks toward the Gulf, rather than dissipating over Mexico, the Atlantic side of that Gulf moisture could interact with the very favourable sea surface temperature anomalies already in place. I am not forecasting a Gulf hurricane. I am not saying there is an imminent threat to the United States coastline. What I am saying is that the period from June 10th through June 20th is a window of elevated atmospheric potential for severe weather outbreaks in the Midwest and plains, for intense heat across the southern and eastern states, and for at least a possibility of tropical development in the Gulf that every person from Texas to Florida needs to have on their radar. When the Euro and GFS agree on a general large-scale pattern at this time range, you pay attention. The updated NOAA seasonal forecast shows above normal precipitation is favoured across the southeast, central Rockies, and southern high plains through the rest of June. The wettest signal in the second half of the month is directly tied to this tropical moisture surge from the Gulf and Caribbean. That moisture does not care whether it is wrapped around a named tropical system or simply streaming northward as an atmospheric river of deep tropical air. Either way, it is going to interact with the severe weather setups across the plains and produce significant rainfall events. Drought conditions that have persisted across parts of the Midwest and Ohio Valley are going to break in a dramatic fashion. That is not good news when it comes in the form of 3 to 5 inches of rainfall in 24 to 48 hours from a slow-moving supercell complex or a stalled front enhanced by tropical moisture. Flash flooding is going to be a major secondary hazard across the Midwest and Ohio Valley as we move into the 2nd and 3rd weeks of June. The tornado season did not end in May. It shifted north, and it is about to expand. Tornado Alley in summer is not a fixed geographic concept. It stretches from the Canadian border all the way to the Gulf Coast. When the atmosphere provides the instability, the shear, and the trigger, tornadoes happen. Right now, all 3 of those ingredients are lining up across a very large part of the country. The Storm Prediction Center explicitly noted this morning that mid-June is likely to feature severe weather threats in the traditional areas of the northern plains and upper Midwest. Multiple intense low-pressure systems are expected. Severe weather outbreak potential increases as we approach the middle of the month. The 2026 summer pattern is not one that you can watch casually. This is one of the most dynamically active setups I've seen heading into a meteorological summer in years. If today's video helped you understand what is coming, please share it with anyone you know in the plains, the Midwest, the Southeast, or along the Gulf Coast. Every person who watches this video is more prepared than they were before they clicked. Tomorrow I will be watching Friday's severe weather threat very closely as updated model runs come in. I will also have a refined look at the 10 to 15 day tropical signal as the next suite of Euro and GFS ensemble runs comes out of the morning cycle. If you want to jump straight to the tropics discussion, that segment begins roughly 18 minutes into the video. If you only want the severe weather timing for today and tomorrow, that is in the first 10 minutes. Subscribe to Sky Space Lab so you're notified the moment new updates drop. This is not the kind of summer where you check the forecast once a week. Thank you for watching. Stay informed, stay prepared, and I will see you tomorrow.